Darren Holt's name was once printed on every construction sign in Greenfield, a symbol of progress and ambition, until one quiet Saturday morning when his silver sedan tore through a crowded playground, turning a peaceful town into the scene of a nightmare. It was one of those mornings when everything seemed right in Greenfield. The sun hung low in a bright blue sky, birds darted between the trees, and the air carried the smell of freshly cut grass. The small town always felt slow on weekends. Parents sat on benches, sipping coffee and chatting while their kids raced through the playground. A few joggers passed along the trail beside the creek, their footsteps quiet and steady. It was the kind of morning people wished they could freeze forever, peaceful, familiar, and safe. At around 10:30 a.m., a distant hum of an engine started to rise. It was faint at first, easy to ignore, blending into the sounds of laughter and the creak of the swings. But the hum grew louder. Some parents began to glance toward the road, wondering who was driving so fast on a calm Saturday morning. Then, in a matter of seconds, the hum became a roar. A silver sedan shot down Oak Ridge Street, moving far too fast for the narrow road lined with trees. It swerved sharply, clipping the curb and scattering dust as it approached the park entrance. Tires screeched, rubber burned, and the sound made every head turn. The car didn't stop. It tore through the wooden gate, splintering it into pieces, and sped straight across the playground lawn. Children screamed and ran. Parents grabbed their kids, some stumbling as they tried to pull them away. The sedan flew past the slide, its wheels cutting deep tracks through the dirt, missing a seesaw by inches. The driver didn't seem to slow down even once. The sound of the engine echoed across the park, loud and harsh, overpowering the chaos of frightened voices. A red ball bounced into its path and exploded under the tires. The car veered toward the open field, smashing through a trash bin before bursting out the other side of the park, back onto the street. Within seconds, it was gone, leaving behind nothing but the smell of exhaust and a stunned silence. Parents held their children close. A few people stood frozen, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. The grass was torn up, the swings twisted sideways, and a deep rut cut through the middle of the field like a scar. Then came the sirens. The first police car appeared less than a minute later, lights flashing, tires skidding as it turned down Oak Ridge. Two more followed close behind. Officers jumped out, scanning the park, shouting for witnesses. No one had been hit, though it had been dangerously close. People started talking all at once, pointing in the direction the car had gone. Someone mentioned the license plate. Another tried to describe the driver, but the details didn't make sense. Some said it was a man. Others weren't sure at all. The playground that had been filled with laughter only minutes earlier now looked like the aftermath of a storm. Bits of the broken gate lay scattered near the road, and a child's shoe sat abandoned near the tire marks. Reporters would later call it the chase that cut through the heart of Greenfield, but at that moment no one was thinking about headlines. They were thinking about how close it had come, how easily it could have been worse, and how quickly peace had shattered on what was supposed to be just another quiet morning. The chase that brought terror to Greenfield had begun miles away, long before the silver sedan reached the park. It started as something routine, the kind of traffic stop that never makes the news. Officer Riley was patrolling near the highway entrance when he spotted the sedan speeding past a red light. The car was moving too fast for the quiet weekend roads, weaving slightly as though the driver was in a hurry to be anywhere but there. Riley flicked on his lights, expecting the driver to pull over like anyone else would, but instead, the sedan accelerated. In seconds, it was clear this wasn't going to be an ordinary stop. The driver pushed harder, the engine's roar echoing through the narrow streets. Riley radioed for backup and stayed on the pursuit, maintaining distance but keeping the car in sight. The silver body glinted under the sun as it darted between vehicles, cutting corners with precision that didn't feel random. Whoever was behind the wheel knew these streets. They weren't just running, they were navigating. The chase moved from open road to residential blocks where the danger grew with every turn. Families watering lawns froze as the car flew past. A delivery truck swerved to avoid collision, nearly tipping onto the curb. Traffic lights, speed limits, and stop signs meant nothing to the driver. The police tried to close in, but each time they got close, the sit-ins slipped away, taking unexpected routes that forced them to slow down. Radio chatter filled the air. Officers ahead set up temporary roadblocks, hoping to contain the situation before anyone was hurt. But the driver seemed to anticipate every move. At one point, dashcam footage showed the sedan turning into a narrow alley, brushing so close to a wall that sparks flew. It emerged on the next street just seconds later, forcing a patrol car to brake hard to avoid a collision. No one understood the reason for the chase. The license plate check revealed nothing unusual, no stolen report, no criminal record, no alerts of any kind. The car was registered to a local contractor named Darren Holt. It should have been a normal vehicle driven by a normal man, yet his actions made no sense. Every maneuver seemed deliberate but desperate, as if the driver was being chased by something far more terrifying than the police themselves. The pursuit stretched over 15 minutes, weaving through nearly every corner of town. Residents later said they heard the sirens long before they saw the cars. Windows rattled, dogs barked, and people stepped outside only to rush back in when the chase tore past their streets. The silver sedan became a blur of panic and noise. As it neared the center of Greenfield, dispatchers warned officers to slow down. The next turn led toward the park, an area full of families and children. Riley shouted through the radio for the driver to stop, but the sedan didn't even hesitate. It sped straight ahead, the distance closing rapidly between asphalt and open green. Officers were ordered to fall back for safety. It was the hardest call Riley had ever obeyed. He watched helplessly as the car disappeared past the park gates, the dust rising in its wake. In that brief moment, everything shifted from a chase meant to stop a reckless driver to something that would haunt the town for years to come. 3 miles from the park, the chase ended as suddenly as it had begun. The silver sedan was found on the edge of a half-finished construction site, its engine still running and the driver's door hanging wide open. The car sat crooked on uneven dirt, one tire spinning weakly in place before slowing to a stop. Dust clung to the metal, and the faint smell of burned rubber hung in the air. Police approached cautiously, guns drawn at first, but the vehicle was empty. Whoever had been behind the wheel was gone. The scene was eerily quiet. The only sound came from the car's engine cooling, ticking softly like a clock. Officers circled the area, calling out, but no one answered. There were footprints in the dirt leading toward the nearby field, but they vanished near a pile of broken concrete. No sign of struggle, no blood, nothing to suggest where the driver had gone. It was as if the person had stepped out of the car and disappeared into thin air. Inside the sedan, investigators found strange details that didn't match the chaos of the chase. The interior was spotless, almost unnaturally clean. There were no fingerprints on the steering wheel or door handles, no personal items, not even a smudge on the mirrors. The only thing inside was a small stack of envelopes tucked neatly into the glove compartment. Each was sealed, labeled with a name, and arranged in perfect order. The names were familiar. Several belonged to residents of Greenfield, shop owners, teachers, and parents who lived near the park. There was also one addressed to the mayor's office. When detectives opened an envelope, they found only a single sentence written in bold red ink: "You didn't listen." The same message was repeated in every envelope. No threats, no explanations, just that one phrase. As officers ran the car's registration, the pieces began to connect. The sit-in belonged to Darren Holt, a construction contractor who had once overseen a major housing development just outside of town. That project had been shut down 2 years earlier after residents filed complaints about poor safety conditions and unstable ground. The community petitioned the local council, and eventually the site was abandoned. Holt's company went bankrupt soon after, and according to records, he had been fighting lawsuits ever since. When detectives searched the trunk, they found it completely empty except for a small box of old blueprints and a torn safety vest. The papers were water-stained and unreadable, but one had a red X marked over the same park where the chase ended. It didn't make sense. The car had crashed miles from the site, yet somehow Holt's trail kept leading back toward the heart of town. Officers combed through the construction site for hours, but the driver was never found. There were no witnesses who saw anyone running, no security cameras nearby, and no signs of a struggle. The sun dipped below the horizon as investigators packed up, leaving the car to be towed for evidence. That night, Greenfield buzzed with rumors. Some believed Holt had planned the chase as revenge for losing everything. Others thought someone else had taken his car, trying to send a message in his name. But one thing everyone agreed on was that the envelopes changed everything. Whatever the chase had been about, it wasn't random, it was personal. Detectives wasted no time tracing the name tied to the silver sedan. Darren Holt had once been a familiar figure in Greenfield. For years, his construction company had handled most of the town's building projects, schools, offices, and homes. People knew his face from local newspaper photos, always smiling beside newly built properties. But after the housing project collapsed 2 years earlier, Holt seemed to vanish. The unfinished site had become a sore spot in Greenfield, a reminder of what went wrong. Lawsuits, debts, and angry letters piled up, and eventually Holt's office closed for good. When police arrived at his home on Maple Drive, they found the place empty. Dust coated the windowsills, and stacks of unopened mail filled the front step. The neighbors said they hadn't seen him in weeks, maybe months. One woman recalled hearing loud noises late one night, the sound of boxes being loaded into a car, but by morning, the driveway was clear. The garage still held a few tools and broken pieces of wood, but the rest of the house looked abandoned, like someone had left in a hurry. Inside, investigators found signs of someone obsessed. The walls of Holt's office were covered with pinned photographs and papers. There were maps of Greenfield, copies of the old housing plans, and several newspaper clippings about the petition that had shut his project down. A red marker circled certain names, the same ones found on the envelopes inside the car. On the desk sat a single item, a half-burned candle surrounded by ashes and bits of melted wax. Detectives pieced together a rough timeline. Holt's business failed, he lost his investors, and his marriage ended shortly after. Financial records showed he'd sold most of his assets in the past year, leaving only his car and a small storage unit under his name. The unit was located near the same construction site where police found the sedan. When officers opened it, they discovered piles of old documents, damaged tools, and a series of weathered notebooks. In those notebooks were fragments of writing, thoughts, drawings, and cryptic notes that grew increasingly unstable toward the end. One page stood out more than any other. In jagged handwriting, Holt had scrawled, "They buried the truth, not just the pipes." The phrase sent investigators back to the old construction site, now fenced off and overgrown with weeds. Holt had spent years insisting there were problems with the land itself, soil instability, strange sinkholes, and unreported safety incidents. At the time, no one believed him, but now his words suggested he thought something deeper had been hidden there. Police brought in ground-penetrating equipment, searching for anything that might explain his actions. Nothing significant was found, only debris and empty concrete foundations. The only trace of Holt after the chase came from a grainy security camera near a gas station about 30 minutes before it all began. He appeared pale and unshaven, wearing a dark jacket and gloves. He filled his car with fuel, glanced over his shoulder several times, and seemed to be talking to himself. In the footage, something was visible in the back seat under a blue tarp, but the image was too blurry to identify what it was. When detectives compared his license photo to the driver seen during the chase, the features were hard to match. The movements looked deliberate, but the face was hidden by glare and shadow. Some officers began to question if Holt had been behind the wheel at all. Others believed he planned everything to send a message before disappearing. Either way, the more they uncovered about Darren Holt, the less sense it made. Every answer only opened another question, and every lead brought them closer to realizing that the truth behind the chase was far darker than anyone in Greenfield expected. Months passed after the chase, and Greenfield slowly returned to its quiet routines. The playground had been repaired, the torn grass replaced, and the broken gate rebuilt. Yet even as the park looked the same, the people who lived nearby never quite felt at ease again. Parents still watched their children closely, glancing toward the road whenever an engine sounded too loud. The police investigation remained open, but without any trace of Darren Holt, it began to fade from headlines. Some called it a closed case. Others whispered that Holt was still out there, waiting. Then, half a year later, a discovery changed everything. One early morning, a park groundskeeper named Simon Turner arrived before sunrise to inspect the newly seeded area near the creek. While trimming the grass behind the swings, his shovel struck something solid. At first, he thought it was just an old pipe left from earlier repairs. But when he dug deeper, he unearthed a small metal box, rusted and sealed shut with tape that had nearly disintegrated. Curious and unsettled, he brought it straight to the police. Inside the box were papers, damp, yellowed, and brittle at the edges. They were copies of the same petition that had shut down Holt's development project 2 years earlier. Folded between them were several newspaper clippings about the safety issues at the site and the decision to close it. There was also a photograph of Holt standing in front of the unfinished construction, smiling faintly with a hard hat tucked under his arm. On the back of that photo was a handwritten message in faded black marker, "You built over their warning." The message sent shockwaves through the department. Investigators reopened the case, wondering what Holt meant. Forensic teams examined the box, but no fingerprints were found. The handwriting matched samples from Holt's notebooks, confirming it had been written by him. What didn't make sense was how the box ended up buried near the playground, the same park he drove through during the chase. Detectives speculated that Holt had buried it before the incident, perhaps hoping someone would find it later. Others believed he was trying to expose something the town ignored. The phrase "their warning" became the focus of every theory. Some thought Holt believed the land where the housing project was built was unsafe, maybe even contaminated. Old workers from the site were interviewed again, and a few remembered strange sinkholes forming unexpectedly, tools vanishing overnight, and areas being filled quickly without explanation. None of it could be proven, but the stories added an eerie layer to the mystery. Despite renewed efforts, nothing more surfaced. Holt remained missing, and no evidence explained what pushed him into that frantic chase. Psychologists called it a breakdown triggered by stress and obsession, while locals insisted there was more to it, that Holt had uncovered something dangerous. The discovery of the box only deepened their unease. Years later, people still visit the park without realizing what once happened there. The new swings shine in the sunlight, children laugh, and the air feels peaceful again. Yet beneath the grass and the memories lies a piece of a story no one could fully understand. Darren Holt's name has faded from most records, but his final message continues to echo in Greenfield, a quiet reminder that some warnings, once ignored, never stop whispering.